Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better. Every week, we bring you a story straight from our brains, purely for the love of the game. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
I'm Seth.
And we're here to continue telling you the story of Robin Hood in space. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Reed last week had fiction by another name, and he chose Robin Hood. It's set in space, though, which is kind of cool.
But Robin Hood is a fiction?
Robin Hood is a myth and a legend, a lot like King Arthur. We're pretty sure someone like him existed, but we're not exactly sure. Right?
I would say that's right.
Right.
Be close.
So Seth had Reed, I think, came out with his first last week and talked about it. And then Seth's prophecy, which he had last week, was the fact that Robin Hood is a story that exists in this universe, but the parallels aren't exact, or maybe they are exact. You can't people don't know that it's the story of Robin Hood, but there's some similarities to it. Am I getting this right, Seth?
Kind of. I would say in space, you would have, I think what was kind of brought forth last time was, because the way I put it out would be some character has the book or is obsessed with the story of Robin Hood, right? And so is bringing up concepts or things that are not that they're recognizing them as things that are happening, but is bringing it up. And so if you have this space age thing, right, you have this story that's now, I don't know what, another millennia or so beyond, us.
Right.
And so their version of Robin Hood could be, slightly different based on, let's say, civilization has spent, what is this, a millennia in space, right? And so concepts of a medieval stuff might be skewed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether or not their version has the right understanding of what a king is, or a feudal system, the idea of the archery contest might be a little bit different. And so the reader's going to understand that, they have a copy of Robin Hood, but it's going to be almost like Disney's Robin Hood compared to, I guess you could say, more classical Robin Hood, right? Where the high points kind of hit there, but it's very, skewed. Someone had Disney's Robin Hood, you might think oh yeah, this had always been, these forest critters or something, right?
Yeah, I gotcha.
So it's that's kind of how it's skewed. But
yeah, you'll have to get more in depth in that as we go along, because I like that idea, but I think it needs some more fleshing out, some more practical examples as we go along. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I had magic system, which was the idea of so ichor is the thing that runs in the veins of the gods. That's what the word comes from. And everyone produces a small amount of this ichor, which is this force that's your will and your strength and your spirit all together. Everyone produces a small amount, but heroes produce a lot more. So the example of a woman who can pick up a car with her children underneath, that's a great time of stress that ichor flows much more. During death, if you're going to die heroically, that's another place in which it flows much more. Heroes are mutants that produce this in much greater amounts. And the only problem is that if you produce too much of it, if you do too much greatness, then you calcify and turn to stone. So there are statues of famous heroes who have done great things, and they kind of act as batteries and accumulators and storage units for this ichor. And people use, the George Washington, right, is a giant, Titan class battleship that's powered by, no, it's not called the George Washington. It's called the Founding Fathers. And it's powered and sustained by all the statues of all of the founding fathers, including George Washington. And so it's kind of like a museum in and of itself. And it's this giant thing, so families who have had heroes in their lineage will have access to these statues. And then also an increased probability that their own children, will have this ichor, this mutation, which is a blessing and a curse, because if you use too much of it, you turn to stone. But you kind of are driven to using it if you have it. So that was my thing from last week. One of the things I wanted to postulate to you guys that literally just came to me right now, because this is an improv podcast, is that the family that owns this, or the lineage that owns this, where this story takes place, has the statue of Robin Hood. Kind of like history is doomed to repeat itself. You know what I mean? Kind of like history is a giant wheel that recycles things over and over and over again. The power that is exuded from the ichor that's exuded from this Robin Hood statue is sort of causing, how do I explain this? Do you know that you can take honey and put water on it? Like you put a little honey in a bowl and you put some water over it. And if you like sort of swish it around, it'll form honeycomb patterns. Because the crystals in the honey have like a genetic memory of being in. It's one of the ways they use to test honey, if it's actually honey or just corn syrup that's been sweetened. I mean, that's been flavored and stuff. It's like it has a memory of what it used to be, even though it doesn't look like it at all.
I didn't know that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So I'm postulating that is what is happening here, is that the personality and the history and the reality of what Robin Hood went through is exuding this whole place, which is causing things to happen the same way over again, which is one of the reasons why, Seth, in your story element from last week, the books about Robin Hood would kind of match up, but not really. And you would kind of be able to see parallels, but not really. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So anyways, that was our story elements from last week. What did you guys draw at the end of last week?
I have villain sidekick.
Fighting style.
I have wise old man. Anyone have any other interesting, story building elements you want to add to this? I do have a timeline of Robin Hood here. But it's not really complete or good. It starts in January 1st of 1066 with the battle at the Stamford Bridge and ends in January 1st of 1247 at the death of Robin Hood. So any other cool story building elements you guys wanted to add in?
There's like a little bit with the fighting style, but I'll save that for the...
Gotcha.
So, when I introduced the story, I introduced a character. I called him AJ Jones, and he was a veteran. He had been discharged from his service in the Space Force, compulsory service.
Yeah. And
he was headed back to his home planet where his family had been pioneers and built, a holding. They had facilities and production facilities. I hadn't even decided, what was it they were doing, but they were surviving, and they were, shall we say, contributing to the commerce of the universe, so to speak.
Right.
And he comes home, and his dad had died, but the trusted steward that whose family had helped them, for a couple of generations had been killed. And his home place had been commandeered by kind of we didn't come up with a name. I called it the collective, but kind of the combine that has control of things back home.
Right.
And so hence the Sir Robin of Locksley, returning from the Crusades and finding the, wicked Prince John in control and his lackey, the Sheriff of Nottingham, pushing his people around and causing bad stuff.
Right.
So you're saying like is this statue on this guy's place?
I don't know. Maybe it's hidden somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in an old place somewhere, time where it's just been left time out of mind. My thought is that people don't understand this whole history repeating itself. Yeah. And my also thought is that the reason why people don't is because like all the famous people in history, their statues are being used so that ichor doesn't have a chance to kind of like move out into the area.
So you mentioned there's like, like a nebula in the area had been, kind of nicknamed Sherwood Forest, and there was some treacherous aspect to try to navigate the area. There might be a place there where the statue would be.
And I was trying to think when you were talking about like what his family produced, and it has to be something that's interesting enough that the sort of this collective governing body wants to clamp down.
Yeah.
It could even be something like they're like one of the first ships that came to this area got lost in the nebula, and now like just the way that the nebula interacted with the statue that's inside of it is kind of affecting everything else. It's maybe there's a more than normal amount of ichor produced by people who live in the planets. It's like a compounding effect with the statue or statues that are in the nebula mixed with the whatever chemicals are in the nebula are causing. Basically, people are much more powerful coming out of this area, and that's why these collective governing bodies want to both stamp them down and keep them from rising up, but also kind of peel them off and use them for mandatory military service.
Yeah, right.
Well,
I could start. I could introduce my character.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, I've got villain Sidekick, and I'm imagining that the villain is basically he's like the head of this organization. And I've got my guy, the Sidekick. His name is Shotsky, and kind of he would always ask himself, what's the angle when trying to position himself for the best possible advantage in any situation. And he had kind of landed on his feet this time. Here he is, and his official title includes the word director, and kind of directing is what he does. If he was a salesman, the technique he would use is the assumed close. Kind of the high pressure. He just starts filling out the paperwork, just like don't give a person a chance to say no, really. And what I mean by that is like the way he handles the whole process of like taking over the holdings on this planet of the families of these pioneers that had come and carved things out. He just kind of takes charge. He's a real take charge kind of guy. He's got the blessing knowing that he's not going to get slapped down by the boss. He's kind of got carte blanche to do what he wants. And he just takes charge, starts just assuming everybody's cooperation.
Yeah.
And resistance or objections are just dismissed rather than dealt with, unless somebody gets real, wait a minute here. Well, then he considers himself kind of his role as the enforcer of the organization, the collective will of the organization, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he has a couple of stooges. He just is good at pushing his weight around. And just like I say, he just assumes cooperation and is very intimidating in the way he handles himself. So this is Shotsky. He doesn't have any kind of code of personal honor. There is nothing. He doesn't see as, personal property is just property that he hasn't taken from someone yet. If somebody doesn't want you to, nobody takes anything from him. He's there to take stuff from other people. It's like, he just has found himself now in a place where he's got the backing of the organization, so to speak. And he knows the big guy is looking out for him. So he just produces. He produces he takes over, controls, organizes things, makes sure there's no trouble. And then, of course, he's on the lookout for A.J. Jones because, the organization paid some bribes to have him offered jobs, different places. Be best if he never came back, but headed back he is. So there you have the story.
So the sheriff of Nottingham then.
Yep.
Gotcha. That's that analog. That's really good. My analog is the Friar Tuck, obviously, wise old man. When people started to spread throughout the universes, right, as the ichor drives became more and more powerful and people tried to spread out farther and farther and farther, a thing happened, which happens with a lot of religious organizations, is that they sent missionaries out, right? They sent chaplains, they sent people along to try and because you travel hundreds of thousands of light years away, how are you gonna stay in concourse with everyone else? How are you gonna stay in right theology with everyone else?
Yeah.
Which is always a big, first it was across the world, across Europe, and then it was across the ocean,
Uh-huh.
And the Pope and churches have been trying to kind of get everyone to come back onto their bandwagon for what's it been, about 2,000 years? So he was part of this kind of re-piification, right? Piety effort that was sent out by groups of religious organizations. I'm not going to say that he was Catholic, because I'm not looking to have a religious debate, but he was sent out, and he quickly recognized the importance of moralistic thinking, piety, religious thought process, morality as a general thought process, but recognized and realized that the religious orders that were sending him out were trying to swing the pendulum too far. That's typically what happens when you have a retaliatory work. Something bad happens and you swing the pendulum really, really far into conservatism, and then the next generation swings it the other way into liberalism, and then it just kind of is a pendulum swinging back and forth. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And he just wasn't interested in it, and this is the great fracturing of religion trying to be dictated over long distances. That is just a reality. And so he has kind of been running sort of covert church for the last sort of 30 years, right? All of his licenses and stuff are in order. And so until he starts to really put his lot in with AJ, the ruling bodies, these organizations, they kind of have to ignore him, because he technically his position is higher than everyone, save the highest echelons of the ruling body. He can't be killed. And so he just kind of goes around trying to find humanity, right?
Cool.
Trying to bring people's humanity back. And he does that through food. He does that through just
brewing.
Yeah. So he has a ship. He has a fleet of ships, and they do work for people. And he, finds these little mining asteroid colonies where everyone's living in sardine cans, size quarters, and children are growing up with 10 square feet of space to run around in, and he invites them on to his giant, it used to be a cruise liner, but it's been retrofitted to be a huge, wildlife preserve,
Oh, cool.
And so he kind of brings his efforts to bring humanity back to people, because a lot of these worlds that people are colonizing, aren't going to start seeing plant growth in, for 10 generations. So people are changing as they live out in these colonies to forget, the color green as a part of life, to forget the wind and to forget the smell of soil and stuff like that. And he's trying his best, as he understands, to kind of bring that back to people. And he's pretty much immune to, like I said, the authorities until he starts to throw in with AJ. And my thought is that so in the story of Robin Hood, he becomes the band of, there's lots of different versions of it, but he becomes the Robin Hood's, the Band of Merry Men's clergy.
Right.
That's one of the things that he does. So, my thought is that he meets AJ, meets his band of, thieves and cutthroats and disenfranchised people and mercenaries, some of them, and tries to show them what they're fighting for,
Yep.
So that is the story of this guy. I don't know what his name is. We'll call him Tucker, right? Because of Friar Tuck.
Cool.
So
So the fighting style, it's not anything particularly new, but it's simply kind of what people have always done, right? Until I would say probably modern times. I don't know how like familiar you guys are with like feng shui.
A little bit.
I've heard of it.
So it's like the idea of feng shui, not that I think you'll understand the idea in a minute here, but the idea of feng shui is like how to like aesthetically set up a room so that your eyes are drawn to the right place. You know, the energy of the room flows in the right direction and how
you don't have a door opening to your back and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like a lot of that kind of stuff. So without getting into like the Eastern mysticism of it, but again, like the idea behind like there's a right way to set up a room, right? Like you wouldn't have the bed turned a certain way. The couch should be facing a certain way. It shouldn't be sticking out this way. You know, if people are gathered facing a certain like nautical direction, is that the right term?
I think so.
Right. That's going to, you know, make the room more comfortable. But then kind of apply that to warfare. Right. And if you think about it, like that is kind of in the background how war was fought. Right. You took troop numbers, where they were positioned, you know, which side of the hill you were coming from, which direction the wind was blowing from.
Right.
You know, how, you know, a smaller force could defeat a superior force, you know, and throughout history, we think like, oh, they used good tactics and, you know, they took them by surprise. And it's like, well, no, actually, there's a reason why having, as it would be, the high ground, right? And so you would have kind of seen this, you know, played out more or less in history with, you know, that's why you had formations. That's why you know, moved, let's say, the collective amounts of troops around the battlefield, right? Like in our recent history that we can think of, we think of like, you know, the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And we're like, why did they just line up and shoot at each other? Right. And I think if you get into it, there's more of like a technical, like, okay, you have a certain amount of like regiment numbers and they're holding this hill, like they're positioned here. We move them around here. It was more about positioning pressure, right? Rather than, right? So it seems barbaric or weird that they would just line up and shoot each other. But I think that was simply because that's where the weaponry had advanced to compared to the way they had been using tactics. Now, some other tactician and historian might be able to correct me on this, but that's kind of my opinion, right? Because I mean, everyone always had formations, right?
Yeah.
You know, It was always, you know, take this hill, hold this hill. The fortification is on top of the hill, right? A choke point at where two rivers meet, right? And some of these things seem like, you know, they're half drawn through things like economics and, right? But really it all plays into this, you know, the I-core thing, right? And so you're kind of pushing and pulling this kind of energy of the battlefield, this, you know, like you've got your different kind of troops, right? You know, different people that you kind of like have groups up to test certain things, kind of push into an area, scout it out, skirmish, you know, adjust your tactics, move a different, you know, more renowned unit in, or, you know, that whole kind of back and forth moving of the battlefield, right? And then, you know, of course, if like the general was closer, people fought harder, right? It would rally the men, right? But really what's going on is this I-core thing where then you have like a structure, right? You know, kind of like same like they build the castles, right? Where it was like, why does this wall jet out like this? Why is it a certain height rather than, you know, this height? Why is it, you know, all of this stuff, let's say, played into this kind of feng shui energy of the battlefield, you know, how was it perceived, you know, right? Like it wasn't just that you had better, you know, soldiers on the battlefield, but where were they placed on the battlefield, right? And you can see this kind of play out in games like, you know, chess in any of its alliterations, right? Or Go, you know, different things like Othello, you know, you've got like Japanese chess. I think China has a chess kind of game. You had a different kind of one. The Norse had it where it's like it's kind of like chess, but it's kind of played out different and like the pieces move. But it was kind of about like hedging in, kind of like setting up choke points and setting up structure to kind of push the battlefield a certain way. And so I think that's, as it would be, the fighting style has always been that, but perhaps especially with the open use of I-Core, right? So it's like you take the field and it's not so much having, 30 cruisers and they only have 10. If you just come out in a flat formation, right, and they come at, with a structured thing that's like channeling the I-Core from the certain direction, it's going to function better, right? It's going to, right. And so one of the things, they have two things, and I'm thinking this could be something where like it replaces like the archery contest, right? Where of course they fight big battles and stuff like that, but then there's like some kind of chess game that's kind of like that's what tacticians play, right? It's like, what is it? I want to say they had something like this in Ender's Game, didn't they?
I mean, besides like the battle room stuff, they had a couple of different strategy games that they would play. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the battle rooms were all about like formations and like stuff like that.
Yeah, but anyways, I'm thinking some kind of like a chess game where it's like it starts out where you're, it'd be like a chessboard or like a Go board or something like that. I can't remember what like the Japanese chess is. It's been a while since I've looked at that, but I know like each of the different pieces have different moves and they kind of like can do different things and a lot more stuff than regular chess, but that kind of idea. So there's like this, like that's kind of like the intellectual game that people play, right? But it's very wrapped up in like how they actually do their space battle or a land battle because, right? Like you would bring, right? Because you have the I-Core emanating from the different ships, right? And it powers the ships, but also you have those heroes behind you, right? Like the generals. And if they're just anywhere on the battlefield, right? Where's that connection going to the different, troops you have? And so the whole setup and then play out of it is kind of what you're getting at. And so that's what this game is. And I'm thinking that possibly kind of like that's the thing that they use to kind of draw him out, right? Is having, because of course they don't have like, let's say archery. How do they do archery? So then that's kind of my thought.
Yeah, some great contest.
Yeah,
I was thinking
what's that?
When you were talking about this, I was thinking of either a circuit board, like you create these channels in how you organize your ships or your people, and it causes like the I-Core to move smoothly in different directions, which allows you to exert like not just physical pressure, but like emotional and mental pressure on your enemy. And then I thought of like have you seen like the football plays, where it's like dots and zeros? And it's like, okay, these guys are going to rush this way. These guys are going to rush this way. These guys are going to turn around like this. That's like basically exactly what you're talking about. It's like these complex football plays, you have all these different people and they're all going to move in different ways. And that's going to channel that. And then the goal is to come up with like the craziest of play, not the craziest, but like the one that uses I-Core the most efficiently, the one that can like, you can blind your enemies using it. You know what I mean? I like that. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah. So anyways, that's the fighting style isn't necessarily anything new, but it's just the reapplied idea, of kind of what they have always done, but applied to using what they now know and are actively using in their ships and their way of life. But anyways,
yeah,
it's the
I like that because that kind of speaks to the fact that the ruling party, whatever the collective, whatever this thing is that's exerting pressure in a bad way, like they have sort of believed because they've gotten away with it for long enough that it's like the numbers game. That's how you win, or there's like the 10 strategies to win any fight, and then what our hero does is he starts, because he is an avid player of this game and because he can think outside the box and is not sort of bound to predetermined strategy ideas, starts to meld the two. Where like for hundreds of years, the game has kind of been separated from battle. It's like, well, yeah, it is battle tactics, but you can't actually do like a double helix, super maneuver in real life, because ships just don't have because you need the extra armor or whatever. And it's like, well, no, if you retrofit your ships to, process Ichor in a different way, you can do that really crazy, risky move that no one thinks you can. You know what I mean? Because I was just reading here, a campaign of tricks and triumphs. So this is the rising action, the golden age of Robin Hood's career, right? This is just based on a bunch of different folklore stuff. Robbing from rich tax collectors, abbots and bishops on the high road, right? That's what he decided. That was his kind of stake against the powers, outwitting the sheriff again and again using disguises, archery contests, fake pardons, rescuing comrades from Nottingham gallows, like doing things so completely outside of the normal thought process. This is what set him apart. This is what made him into, there's plenty of outlaws. AJ gathers plenty of outlaws from the systems, but it's AJ's ability to kind of think outside of the normal way of dealing with things. How does the sheriff of Nottingham deal with Robin Hood being an outlaw? He has some people drop pictures of him and posts it on trees and says, reward for this man. How does Robin Hood make it so that doesn't happen? He pays dowries and protects widows and orphans. He doesn't match same force with same force.
Right.
Anyways, so where do we go from here? We've got a really good basis, but I think we need to kind of walk through the Robin Hood story and draw parallels now, right? Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah. I do. Exactly.
Okay. So I asked an AI to give me a core arc narrative for Robin Hood, and I'm just going to read through it as we work through this. Okay. So there's a lot of different conflicting accounts for how he started and different things like that. So there's going to be a lot of different stuff like that. So set in England, usually during the late 12th century, is ruled by a tyrannical, greedy authority, most often Prince John and his henchmen, the Sheriff of Nottingham, Guy of Gisborne, corrupt abbots, while the good King Richard is away, either in the Crusades or captive, right? So the setting is not that the whole world is corrupt, but there are good people. They're just gone right now. And the power vacuum that happened because of that caused the corruption, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of this corruption, heavy taxes crush the poor. The rich and powerful abuse their authority. Forests are royal preserves where common people can't even hunt to eat. Justice is dead. The strong prey on the weak with impunity, right? This is Reed's villain to a T.
Yep.
I really like, heroes fall, outlawing, inciting incidents. Robin, usually disposed nobleman or a yeoman, Robin of Locksley or Robert Fitzooth, is wronged by the system. So there's lots of different accounts. He kills a king's deer. He's caught poaching. He kills a corrupt official in self-defense. His lands are seized unjustly because of his support of King Richard. So that's kind of, I think we're in that last one, which is where this story is taking place, right? Because AJ comes back and finds all of his family's, property and holdings just taken away from him, because of the corrupt system that is withering away because of the lack of leadership that exists, right?
Yep.
And he speaks out against it. He doesn't just accept it. Like you said, they offered him a job to try to get him away, but he refused.
Right. He just, when he finished his tour of duty, he wanted to go home. And then because he feels responsible for the people that helped his family put it all together, and they're there, it's like you have a company, and I could retire and be comfortable, but there are families that have been working for me that are depending on this livelihood. And so I kind of have to keep it going,
Right. But there's also the fact that he does this not just in a vacuum. He has like Robin Hood does not think I'm going to be king of England.
Right.
So AJ doesn't think I'm the king of this whole place. I'm supposed to be the ruler. He's like, there is a ruler. There is a whatever, a military body, a governing body that is good, but it's gone right now.
Right.
It's not gone like dead. It's like, Richard's at the Crusades.
Yeah. And he was hoping that this, good people honoring contracts, respecting each other's, I have my rights only go as far as the next man's nose, so to speak. Some rules of the road, so to speak, that have been usurped by the organization.
Right. I think I'd like to change this up a little bit and say that one of the things that he does when he gets back is there's a bit of a kind of, there's a bit of a depression era, right? He gets back, he's running, he himself has seen countless horrors and atrocities in his time in the military service, and he meets the wise old man. He meets Tucker.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And that kind of instills in him, like he gets some rejuvenation. He sits by a softly gurgling stream. Right. And it kind of brings him to this place, here's a quote from this day forward. I take from the rich who stole it and give it back to the poor who earned it. Mm-hmm. There's at first it's like, well, what can I do? What injustices can I actually come against? And he realizes I can do a bit. There's a bit that I can do.
Right.
Next is gathering the band, building the found fan, assembles the Merry Men, Little John, Will Scarlet, Much the Miller's Son, Friar Tuck, Alan a Dale, and later Maid Marian. And I just imagine each one of these characters really kind of being a whole crew of a certain type of ship that can do a certain type of thing. Yeah. Because at this point in time, it's not 5 or 10, 20 guys flying around hundreds of millions of miles of space in little spacesuits doing that. It's, Little John is a ship that has particular characteristics, that follow the Little John motif, Mm-hmm. What was it? Little John's the one he met with the quarterstaff on the bridge,
Yeah. And he had to prove himself, right? Or, I'm not going to deal with you unless you're worthy,
Right. So an old mining ship that, is like heavily armored and incredibly tough and uses ramming to invade other ships rather than, boarding parties, it like rams in and like the people who
tear up and open the hull and vent to space is kind of an effective mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah. And it'd be weird to do like Maid Marian because there's supposed to be some kind of love story in there. So you can't do that with have a whole ship's crew in love with another whole ship's crew. So there is some individuality in it, but I like the idea that like Tucker's thing isn't just a friar.
Yeah.
It's a whole, it's his spirit and everything that he stands for spread out throughout an entire ship. And anyone who comes to that can experience Friar Tuck, and then the big thing being forming a guerrilla brotherhood, living outside the law, but bound by their own code of honor, loyalty, and rough democracy. So, living in this nebula, kind of spread out. I don't know.
Yeah. The notion of the consent of the governed, governing by the consent of the governed is it's one of those concepts that presupposes that honor demands that we respect, one man's right to, keep what is his own and raise his family in security,
Yeah.
Okay. So my idea about this like nebula, which is like your Sherwood forest, right? So you have all these different asteroids, these different planets, but being this is space, all these other galaxies and stuff aren't going to function exactly the same way. Sorry, I have anyways, the nebula is kind of like the center of this galaxy, right? And it's all the planets or habitable areas don't, let's say, have like a concentric outward spacing, what do you call it, orbit.
Okay.
But the nebula functions as the sun, right? It reacts with the different atmospheres, creates the heat, filters in the breathable oxygen or gases that, nourish the planets, make them habitable, right? And each one is different, and different ones are habitable or uninhabitable to a certain degree, dependingly, right? But like it reacts where then through the atmosphere, it brings light during the day, the planet or asteroid, whatever is rotating. So there might be some that don't rotate, right? But it's always like this kind of light on one side and dark on the other.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's space. But then that's the nebula. There's no like center, like sun to it. But whatever it is, it's like, and perhaps, it's just, all that, like you said earlier with like the circuit board idea, it is like a energized circuit board of the different gases, different things that are emanating out. So I'm trying to like picture it here, and I can picture what I'm thinking in my head and then trying to explain it. So it's not, they all kind of sit at the barrier or at the outer edge of this nebula, right? And so the easiest way to traverse would be to go right through the nebula. But because it's kind of a mess of, interference and whatever it is, it would be harder to traverse, right? So maybe, that's where they hide out because no one really travels through there. They go, as it would be, the long way around the nebula to get to these other, the other planets in this system, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyways, it was like a sub thought as far as like how this particular system is set up, and who knows, maybe there's something, with the nebula that's causing the, more intrigue. Maybe it affects, the water, the plant, the different things that people are consuming in this area that has that interest, or leaves the residue on the different minerals that are mined out of here that have a higher potency of whatever it is that, they've kind of bullied their way into for some reason.
Yeah, because and I know that in a lot of the Robin Hood stories, Robin Hood catches, that's where Robin Hood lifts the gold and stuff from people, transporting it through Sherwood Forest because it's a thoroughfare they need to get through, So this idea that everything's kind of circling around this nebula or not makes it kind of the shortest path to everywhere else, which makes, AJ taking up residence in this place makes the most sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyways.
Cool. The love story, Marian and personal stakes. Robin Hood and Maid Marian, often as noblewoman trapped in the corrupt court, represent love that transcends class and law. Their romance is constantly threatened by the sheriff of Prince John trying to force Marian into marriage or using her as bait. Do we want to touch a love story? I don't want to.
I'm going to steer clear of that.
Yeah, I someday I'll be able to write decent romance. It's not today though. It's not going to be today that I'm going to be able to write decent romance. All right, the lowest point.
I'd say maybe he names his ship, the Marian.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
The lowest point, betrayal or near defeat. Authorities finally get serious. Massive manhunt, rewards treachery from within. Actually, should we reserve that for the last episode? Because that's kind of the tipping over point. Like right now in our story, AJ has kind of come back from his military service, found the world to be utter and completely destitute. Everything that he thought he was fighting for is no longer good or important anymore. And so he breaks off to try and make the world that he thinks should be. Gathers other such disenfranchised individuals and begins to lay waste to the powers that be. I think really in the hopes that the ruling parties that held forth truth and justice will come back.
Yeah.
And then we'll pick up next week for the last bit of the story and try and make something cohesive.
Cool.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. If you liked it, let us know. If you thought it was boring, let us know. These fictions by another name are always interesting. I'm actually going to take a vote to see if we want to remove that, because it's difficult to try and make an interesting story that has enough uniqueness, but then also follows a parallel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I struggle with it.
I do find it interesting. I think we've only had it twice now.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, the other time we had Ivanhoe, which is another.
No, we didn't. We had The Hobbit.
Did we have The Hobbit?
Yeah,
yeah. Okay. So we've had it 3 times, but.
Oh,
I don't remember the Ivanhoe one. Are you sure? You sure?
It was like a really hard one to do. It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to make an executive decision that story element is getting chopped off after this one. After we absolutely blow this one out of the park, we're going to retire it because of how good we did on it.
That's right.
Yep, absolutely.
Optimistic way to put it.
Hey, Seth, pick a number between 1 through 9.
8.
8. All right. I have happy ending. Oh, that's good.
I mean 9. Unless that would be the one before, and then sequel is the one after. I
read a number 1 through 7.
6.
Wild card Seth has, which for the people listening, that just means that he gets to choose any weird thing to add in.
I thought it was any, so I could go back and pick, let's say, government type.
Yeah, if you want it. Like I said, anything weird.
Or as in like the story element, like a whichever, like a wild card, whichever story element. The random insert would be like the anything kind of wild.
True. Yeah, I suppose that's true. Reed has unique artifact.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to join you next week for the end of this story. Send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Message us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. And until next week, don't forget to wait. It's getting better.